Oh, hello. Since the release of Borderlands 4, Amon has been consistently ranked as one of the lowest performing of the 4 base game Vault Hunters. Because of this, Gearbox rolled out a bunch of buffs to his kit, including all 3 of his skill trees, but these buffs have had a few days to sit with the player base now, and they still weirdly don't seem to be enough to bring up his performance. There are some very glaring reasons as to why this is, so in this video, I'm going to talk about everything you'll need to know about Amon before investing time into playing him on your Borderlands 4 journey. We'll talk about his early game, his late game, why he still needs a lot more buffs and tweaks, and what that all means for you as you play him on Kairos. One small disclaimer, I will be discussing his shortcomings in this video, but don't let that discourage you from playing Amon. He's still absolutely functional in all of the game's content, he just happens to be noticeably weaker in most aspects than other playable characters. The point of this video is to discuss those weaknesses while also acknowledging what he is good at currently. To start this off on a more positive note, let's discuss Amon's early game. In the early game of Borderlands 4, namely the first 30-ish levels, Amon is extremely easy to play and quite strong. Across all 3 of his skill trees, he has access to a very large amount of damage that sweeps through the campaign with ease. His blue tree in particular with Scourge makes the first 30 levels of Borderlands 4 nearly trivial. His cryo whips hit in a massive AoE, and once you unlock the 3-hit combo augment, his action skill uptime increases dramatically, and you can clear entire rooms of enemies in mere seconds. Even bosses are pretty simple work for Amon when using the blue skill tree, though there is of course a noticeable difference in his damage output when comparing AoE versus single target scenarios. But even beyond that, his red and green skill trees feel quite strong in these early levels, and in my experience testing him throughout the campaign, I was able to easily swap skill points around at all times and never once struggled in the entirety of my playthrough. What I'm getting at is, be it because of the recent buffs or because of how easy he is to play in general, Amon feels ridiculously strong throughout your first 15 or so hours of playing him. That is, until you beat the main campaign, and then the real grind begins. Upon beating the campaign of Borderlands 4, you're pretty immediately given access to UVHM 1, or Ultimate Vault Hunter Mode 1, where elemental affinities begin to matter much more, where the enemies of Kairos begin enjoying largely increased health pools, and you begin enjoying taking largely increased damage. The deeper you go towards UVHM 5, the more difficult these things become, and the whole game shifts into what Borderlands is known for as a franchise, the end game loot grind where you spend hours upon hours grinding bosses, collecting the gear you need, and maximizing your character's potential. And where does Amon fit into all of this? Well, pretty much the moment I entered UVHM 1 on my Amon playthrough, I noticed an immediate and massive spike in difficulty, even with my strongest build using the Scourge Whip. Grinding loot becomes far more difficult because Amon begins to struggle heavily with efficiently taking down bosses, so farming takes noticeably and painfully longer than it does with other Vault Hunters. As you reach higher and higher levels of UVHM, you're tasked with completing challenges that involve fighting incredibly tanky bosses and completing missions where enemies have special augments, some of which make gameplay extremely unpleasant for Amon, who is primarily a melee and action skill focused character. These mechanics in the Borderlands 4 endgame make it particularly difficult for Amon to scale up and prepare for UVHM 5, especially when compared to the other playable Vault Hunters who hit massive power spikes and enjoy much more build flexibility than Amon does. To put it simply, Amon does not scale well into the current endgame environment of Borderlands 4. That does not mean he doesn't function at all, because he does have viable endgame builds, but far fewer than any other Vault Hunter, and even his strongest builds pale in comparison to Vex, Harlow, and Rafa. So why is this the case? Why is Amon dramatically weaker in the endgame than other characters? Well, ironically, it kind of falls back to why he's so good in the early game. Amon's big gimmick is that he always basically has 2 action skills. His main action skill for whatever tree he's chosen, and then a forge skill that complements his action skill. For the blue tree, his action skill is the Scourge Whip, complemented by Firewall, the forge skill. In the green tree, he has his Crucible action skill, complemented by his Double Edge forge skill. And in the red tree, he has his Onslaughter action skill, complemented by his Molten Slam forge skill. And you're probably like, oh my god, that's a lot of things happening at once. Slow down. But that's exactly the point. Amon has too many things going on. As a whole, Amon is a character who was intended mostly as an action skill character, relying primarily on his abilities to output his damage. The issue with that is, most of Amon's forge skills and capstones are they're just not good. And the way his skill trees are designed makes it so that you either have to invest heavily into his forge skills for mediocre results, or ignore them entirely and spread out your points shallowly across multiple different trees. In terms of mediocre results, even if you do invest into Amon's skills, some of them have unavoidable glaring issues, like his Onslaughter skill, which is almost entirely melee oriented, and Borderlands 4 does not currently have a very melee friendly endgame. But even his Crucible skill tree becomes extremely weak in the late game because it primarily revolves around forged drone minions, and Amon's minions are just straight up awful after the early game. You end up having to completely ignore most of Amon's action skills and forge skills, otherwise you suffer incredibly grueling farm sessions just to get the gear you need in order to scale. You'll be fighting bosses for minutes at a time, slowing down your grind considerably, and leaving much to be desired from a character whose entire gimmick is constantly playing around his action skills. While it is true that Amon received a bunch of buffs this past update, most of those buffs really just put a band-aid on a wound that I think is much deeper than just a scaling problem for Amon. His skill trees as a whole, his entire kit, it's a bit too difficult to work with right now. As it stands, you only have 49 skill points to invest, and 49 simply isn't enough to make a meaningful investment into the many things that Amon has going on in his kit. The Crucible skill and the Onslaughter skill get completely overshadowed in the late game, and ironically, even though his Scourge action skill is considerably stronger than the other skills, Amon's strongest builds don't really have much to do with the action skills themselves anyways. They more so lean into his heavy melee or ordnance scaling, and they require very strict builds to pull off correctly. Overall, Amon did receive a lot of buffs, and his early game is very strong, dare I say almost too strong, but his overall weaknesses have unfortunately not really been fixed, and his late game is still considerably weaker than that of the other Vault Hunters. That said, he does still have viable in-game builds, and for anyone who still wanted to invest time in him on their next playthrough, I'm gonna link some of his strongest current builds below, and I hope you get a chance to check them out because the creators that made them put a lot of effort into testing them for Amon. Hopefully soon Amon will get some changes to his base kit that help remedy the issues he's facing, and if you liked this video, please subscribe, because I'd love you to be here when my Amon is a god video comes out after some more buffs.